I'm so excited to chat with Camilla Fellis Arnold on the Awaken Feminine podcast. Camilla is the CEO of Tecassia Publishing, a creativity and writing coach, an international best-selling author, and the podcast host for Creative Power. Camilla helps creators, entrepreneurs, and coaches build their businesses, achieve their creative potential, and write incredible solo and multi-author books that position them as soulful leaders in the industry. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us. She's joining me all the way from England. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited for our conversation today, Camilla. I know I can talk to you all day because we were talking before the podcast and we're like, okay, we need to start recording. But before we dive into our conversation, I'd love to know, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
For me, it's a woman or anyone who identifies with that femininity, that they're unapologetic. They know exactly who they are. They've shrugged off societal conditioning, all those expectations and judgments, and that ability to stand firm in who they are, flow with that intuition, and not be swayed by anything. They know what they want and they go out and they get it and don't let anything stop them. For me, that is my definition of the awakened feminine.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Camilla, I want to dive into more about you, obviously, because this is all about you. I want to ask you if you can share with us who you are and why you do what you do.
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question. Why do I do what I do? So I am a publisher. I am also a writer and coach writers and creatives. I have a soft spot for the writers because I think that was always the dream. As a child, I wanted to be the writer. And there was an incident with a relative where I showed them some of my writing, and I think I was about 8 years old, and they made me feel about this big. And it completely shut down my ability to write, but I still love the stories. So I was trying to figure out, how can I stay around stories if I don't feel good enough to write them? And it sent me on this nearly a couple of decades journey of learning how to do design. So I focused on like print design, so books, magazines, that kind of thing. So I thought, I can still design the books that the stories live in. And what happened was I picked up all these skills, as you do. You don't really realize at the time what you're gathering, but I was gathering not just the design skills, but also kind of the publishing skills as well. And it moved me into, someone asked me, I was just designing like graphics and things for their social media, and they said, could you help me with my book? And I said, yeah, okay, why not? Like, just leap in at the deep end. I don't know if I know all of the steps, but why not? And I found in that process that I was struggling to help people. They were coming to me saying, I really, really want to work with you, but I'm still writing. I haven't got to that stage of having that published or ready to publish manuscript yet. Can you help me with the writing? And obviously I had my own hang-ups about being a writer. So I was like, trying to help them as best I could, but it really wasn't giving me the results that I wanted when I was working with them. So I went and did a coaching qualification last year and used those skills to kind of coach myself through my blocks. And I remembered that day where this relative had said this comment that made me feel like, 10 centimeters tall. And in that moment, I remembered, I don't want anyone ever to feel like that again. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they've lost themselves because they've been taken off their path. I didn't want anyone to feel like they had nothing to say, nothing worth sharing. So I became, and still am, very, very passionate about helping people really tap into their soul mission, their authentic voice, and share it with the world. Because I remember being that person. I remember feeling like, I've got nothing to say, nothing to share, no one's going to listen. And it was just the worst feeling. And now, having been able to become an author, best-selling author, all of those things, there's nothing like the feeling of holding that book in your hands and letting those words come out and feeling like you have something worth saying. And that's what I want to empower other people to do, because it's just when you find those words in your soul, and when you're able to kind of channel whatever that message, that mission, whatever it is, when you can get that out of your body and into the world, there's just nothing like that feeling, because you're suddenly at home with yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And it's so interesting how you blocked yourself from writing and then you went into designing, because it's still like a creative aspect of you. And I know you still, do designing and things like that.
Yes.
So, and I want to ask you, for people who might be going through these blocks where they feel, you used to love writing and then something happened and you blocked it. You said you coach yourself. Were there any particular things that really helped you to, kind of move through those blocks? Yeah,
I think for me it was a kind of two-pronged approach, because there was that remembering that memory, and there's the work that I did was around going back to my inner child, so through like meditations and visualizations, and talking to my inner child, my 8-year-old self who was wounded, and saying, you know what, you actually have things that are worth sharing. Don't listen to them. What do they know? And kind of doing that inner child work. But for me, one of the really powerful things was the subconscious tools that I paired with the coaching, because the coaching for me, it can be quite conscious if you're not careful. It's just, you're challenging them and getting them to reflect, but it doesn't always shift the mindset as well. You need something subconscious. So for me, I turned to EFT tapping, and, I let go of whatever it was. I release blah, blah, blah. I release my writer's block, etc., etc. I release all these limiting beliefs. And the combination of the two was the thing that made the difference for me, because it was so deep-seated, so deep-rooted. It wasn't something that I could just talk myself through alone. And I think this is where some people can kind of get stuck, because it can be quite scary to try and go into those emotions wherever they came from, all those blocks. And sometimes you can kind of pinpoint where it is, but obviously we put it in our blind spot for a reason, because it is painful. So it's sometimes that combination of different approaches and different tools that actually helps you unlock the thing. I couldn't tell you exactly when was the moment that I suddenly was able to write again, because it was like a cumulative effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing, because a lot of times there are so many deep-seated things where, there's something we want to do, but then somehow we block it. So it's really helpful to, see how other people go through it, and, the approach of the conscious, like, okay, let's, talk this out, but then combining with that with the subconscious, like EFT, or, even inner child healing is very, you're going back in time to kind of change the energy, change the energy around the situation to help you move forward. So it's really powerful stuff that you're talking about.
It does make a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
It really does. And I think because now it's unlocked, I can sit there, and sometimes those fears don't ever really go away. You're still going to have a day where you show up and you're like, oh, does anyone really care about what I have to say? So now I'm at the position where I can talk myself through it and challenge that, and say to myself, well, what evidence do I have that people don't want to hear from me? What evidence do I have that I have nothing to say? And really talk myself through it. But I couldn't get to that stage without having done all of that other, various different tools, subconscious work, because I think people just think, oh, you can just convince yourself, and if you sort of fake it till you make it sort of opinion, but actually it's much more powerful, much quicker to move through when you try lots of different approaches and involve that subconscious piece as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I want to ask you about your work with writers and creatives, because you were saying that people came to you and they're like, hey, Camilla, can you help me? And you're like, what? Yeah, I can help you, but you just weren't getting the results. Can you expand a bit more about what you meant by you weren't getting them, or getting the results that you wanted? And now, what does it look like to work with you for people that want to write, but they need some help?
Yes. So I think when I think about where I was blocked in my writing, it was mainly around the more creative styles. So, the poetry, the fiction, those kind of things. And they're the pieces that tend to be where you're pouring your heart and soul into it. So when I had people coming to me wanting to write that kind of stuff, I was shying away from them and trying to do it more, I suppose, on an intellectual level, because obviously I had read plenty of books, read, on the internet, done my research. I didn't know, this is how you do like a 3-act structure in a book and blah, blah, blah. But I could feel my heart and soul wasn't in there because I didn't have the experience or the flow with my own creative writing. So I tended to work more with the non-fiction writers. And that was much easier because although I wasn't writing, I had all these blocks around being a writer, I still did blog posts, social media, all of those kind of things. I didn't class them as writing as much. I think people really do separate the two because you're not quite putting your heart and soul into it. And so we were working together, and it was a lot more in that mentorship capacity because I had that experience of, I've done I know what it's like to try and build your business online and social media and blah, blah, blah. So it was good, but it also really limited me in who I could work with and how I could help them. So we couldn't dig as deep, I suppose, into the why and get that real passion out, because as soon as I saw someone having that passion and that excitement and seeing their soul pour into their work, I'm suddenly thinking, I can't do that. That's not something that I can do. So now I can't help them. It was like this kind of wall came down in front of me and I just felt blocked myself. So it was, I suppose, a bit of a stumbling through, as it were, of how can I help you? And then doing the coaching qualification, I think it was about 6 to 9 months of training. It was really, really intensive. Had to do 60 plus hours of coaching hours afterwards as well. So you really learnt your skills. And I did it with a lot of different people on different things. It wasn't just writers I was working with, there was people building their business, etc. And what it gave me that ability to take that step back and get out of the way, because I'd been very much in the mindset of mentorship. So kind of inserting my experience into the process, where suddenly with those extra coaching skills, all those different types of questioning and all the different tools that you can use in a session, suddenly I was able to completely come out of the process and look in with fresh eyes. And for me, the difference between the coaching and the mentoring was the coaching gets them to think more. It gets them to come to the answers on their own rather than me giving them the answers. I'm not directing them as such. I'm helping them find what they already know in themselves. And I'm just, using questions and different tools and different exercises and all those things to open them up. And what it does for them is it really does open them up. I mean, I've been in sessions with people and done like guided meditations, guided visualizations and things. And I've sometimes even had to make up exercises on the fly because certain people were just like not responding to a certain way of doing things. But I now have that agility and flexibility to just say, okay, fine, it's cool. This isn't working for you. Let's try this instead. And it just opens them up in a new way. It allows them to take the driving seat. It allows their passion to really flow through. And because I'm not putting any of my expectations, none of my experience on the process, it's more authentic for them. Their voice comes through. It's not directed by me. And I think in terms of my writing coaching and the publishing I do, that's exactly what I want. Because, in terms of the publishing industry at large, there's a lot of kind of directing the narrative from publishers, from literary agents. They're all kind of shaping the work that people do, shaping the writing. Whereas suddenly I am now able to take that complete step back and say, what is the real message that you want to share? And that becomes really powerful for people. You just see that kind of spark in their eyes, and suddenly it just pours out of them and they can't stop themselves. And that's the difference that the coaching has made for me and my clients, of course.
Yeah. That's really amazing to have that perspective change and the way that you work with your clients. We were talking a bit about this before the podcast, but can you kind of emphasize the importance of really, like, when you work with your clients, is really getting them to find their alignment and find what their sole purpose is and their why and how it is best that they work, rather than you giving them this is what I do, so this is what you should do, kind of thing. Like, can you kind of tell, because being in the coaching space myself, and I've worked with quite a lot of coaches myself, where there is that do this 100-point checklist and then you'll be successful, even though my soul is dying, going, I don't like this.
Right? I totally hear you on this one, because there's so much noise in the coaching space of, if you sign up with me, you'll get my strategy for making like how many figures, and you do this exactly to the letter as I tell you, and this is the result you're going to get. And they kind of do it like a cookie cutter blanket approach. And I found that wasn't working with the writers that I was working with particularly, but generally any creative. They're all so different. They've got their own minds, they've got their own ways of responding to things. I mean, you can sit there and say the majority of creative people I work with, when I do any diagnostic tools with them, particularly like whether they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, they usually come out as visual because they are creative. They just kind of see it differently. But even so, you can't approach all of them in the same way, because everyone has different belief systems, different experiences in life. So trying to give them all that same, well, here is the formula, they don't always respond to it. And I found that actually, let's talk about alignment. Let's talk about your dreams, because that's one of the first things I do in the coaching sessions. People will sign up for however many sessions and say, this is my goal. Fantastic. And in session one, it's like, okay, that's the goal that you've told me that you want to work on. But what's the real dream? In 5 years, 10 years, money's no object. What's the real dream? And really drill down into that, because that's where you find that alignment piece for them. That's where you help them find their roadmap. And it doesn't look the same for everyone, because you could ask 100 people, what does success look like for you? What does your perfect day look like? None of them are going to say the same thing. For someone, it might be, I want to have a cottage by the sea and I just want to write every day. For someone else, it's, I want to make 7 figures in a year and work 10 hours a week. It's different for all of them. So you can't just use that same approach. And then by getting them to generate their own answers to the questions, to the how can you approach this? How can you solve this? Rather than me just saying, well, this is what I did. Because there is a time and a place for that. Sometimes, if you're in that kind of ideas generation, brainstorming space with them, you can sit there and say, you know what, this is what I did. But then for me, it's that point where I don't just say, this is what I did. It's, how does that feel for you? Or how could you use the essence of what I did to help you? Rather than just saying, here's everything I did, follow it to the letter and you will get where I got. Because they don't want to get where I am. They've got their own dreams. And that's the most important thing, to remember that they are all individuals. They've all got their own hopes and dreams and goals, rather than just give me your money. Here's the formula. We're done. It just doesn't work like that for me.
Yeah, I totally resonate with everything you said. And, just want to put a little disclaimer. I'm not putting down the coaches that do that. Like you said, there's a time and place.
Got their own opinion.
Yeah, so, there's a time and place. And, especially if you're starting out, it is that information gathering stage where you're like, this person provides me that person provides me this, but being discerning.
It's really important to try all those things and gather that information, because then you find out what does and doesn't work for you. Because sometimes someone will have a way of doing something, a strategy, and you think, oh my goodness, this is the thing. And that's perfect. So there is a time and a place for, let's try all of the things. Sign up for all the freebies and the masterclasses and just immerse yourself, be like a sponge, soak it all in. But what I like to do is to take that further and then bring in like a discernment piece and say, okay, well, we know all these things. What actually, out of all of it, like sifting through, panning for the gold, what are the things that actually resonate with you as a person?
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of elevates it to the next level, because it's more bespoke. It's actually going to land for them.
Yeah, totally agree. It's then sifting through to find what feels good for each person to do. And I think for me, one of the things is like what gets me sometimes is when the people that you learn from kind of like guilt you into saying that if you don't do it, you're gonna fail, or and then I'm like, okay, let's not do that.
You get those people who make you feel bad, and you just think, well, that's not helping me in any way, shape, or form to make me feel bad just because I haven't followed all your steps. And then it can kind of create this cycle of that person then feeling like they're not enough, and they've got to go search out more people to solve the problem and do more. And then they kind of get in this vicious cycle of constantly doing and trying, and they're like on a hamster wheel, getting nowhere. Whereas if you just kind of stop and just give yourself that grace to say, okay, I know all the steps, I know all the things, I know how to, write my branding page, blah, blah, blah. What do I actually want? What do I actually want my business to look like, my life to look like? That's the piece that people kind of forget. Because what you said there about what feels good, like we live in this society where we've kind of been taught that you're not allowed to feel good, that suffering is like the wound that everyone wears. We define ourselves by our wound and our suffering. And it's like, actually, what happens if we all just followed what made us happy? What difference would that make? Because I find that I'm much more magnetic when I'm excited, I'm enthusiastic, I'm lit up about something. And so many people just kind of forget that that's even an option, to be happy, to explore what feels good. It's like an alien concept to them.
Yeah. It's so funny.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I know. It's funny but sad at the same time. Yeah. As you were talking, when you were like, as you were saying earlier in the piece about not feeling good enough. And I just had this memory pop up of a coach that I used to work with. And he's like, you aren't good enough. If you were good enough, you wouldn't be here. I'm like, wow, I don't want to work with this person anymore.
I don't feel like that's the way to make people feel good. No. When I'm coaching someone, I'm really focused on building up their confidence, making them feel like they have something of value. I mean, a lot of coaches can be quite results driven of, oh, look at my client did this and that and the other. And for me, my favorite story, my favorite results that I had for a client was he came to me saying, I need help with my descriptive passages of text, like describing a room for his fiction novel, etc. He sent me some samples and we had our first session. And he was quite nervous and didn't say a lot, etc., etc. And I said, look, there's nothing wrong with your descriptive writing. What I'm looking at, there's nothing wrong with it. What I feel is the issue is your confidence. Would you like to work on it? And he went away and thought about it and said, yes, let's do it. So we did the rest of our sessions on working on his confidence. And in the last session, this is just the best thing for me. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I love. He said to me, he was on the NHS wellbeing wait list before he met me. And he told me that the week before we had our final session, he'd rung them and taken himself off the wait list because he felt that through our sessions, I'd helped him, give him enough tools, taught him enough tools to use for himself that he didn't actually need to be on the wellbeing wait list. And for me, it was like, that's it. That's the piece. To build someone up to that much confidence that they feel that they don't need that help from the NHS. It's like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. And so many coaches and, other businesses selling all these different strategies and templates and all these things can make people feel this small. And it's like, actually, we want to build them up, because when they are built up, when they're confident in their abilities, they can create so many incredible things. it's just like you unlock that genius in that moment. So that's what I love to see. I love to see people who just kind of flourish. They just open up out of their shell, and suddenly they can sit there and say, you know what, I'm totally worth it. I'm totally good enough. And then you just watch them go off and do their thing, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
That's the most incredible part of the work I do.
That is such a beautiful story. And, you know, like you were saying before, so many of us don't even know that, you know, being happy, being confident, following a joy is actually a thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And
it's like
that
we need permission or something to be able to do it.
Yeah, and then, you know, to the point where we think we have got a mental health issue or there's something wrong with us, where we, you know, like your client goes off to be on the waiting list, and then actually all he needed was someone to just tell him that he's good enough, that there's nothing wrong with him.
And I think it, particularly with creatives and writers, there's a lot of that kind of suffering artist mentality in the space. So people, you know, they look at the geniuses and they look at how wounded they were, and there is a lot of mental health issues amongst some of the greats, and it kind of creates this mentality that in order to produce the great work, we have to have some kind of issue. And what I've been exploring for myself, and then starting to explore more with clients, is this idea of what I call creative joy. It's what happens when you come from creativity from a space of pure joy, rather than like, because the thing is, when people are writing, when they're creating, painting, whatever it is, they bring up those old wounds. It can be like a cathartic process. You know, you're bringing up these raw emotions and you just pour it onto the page, and that speaks to a lot of people. They resonate with your pain. It's like, well, actually, what would happen if you spoke from a place of joy? How would people respond to that? What could you create instead if you weren't stuck in that pain? And just remember that, you know what, you're allowed to create great art, write great stories, make anything, and be happy at the same time. Because this is the thing that kind of I see just prevail amongst the industry, that you have to be suffering and you have to be starving. You don't get paid very well for what you do, and you suffer in the process, and everyone else gets to enjoy the work that you've made, except for you. You don't get to reap the rewards. I mean, you look at someone like Van Gogh, and he sold one painting in his lifetime.
Yeah, you only get rich after you die. Come on.
Yeah, and exactly, this is what people think is the way forward. And like with the books, that the only way that you're actually going to make a living from writing is if you just somehow stumble on becoming the next J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, and you know, your books get made into movies and all of these things. It's like, well, actually, it doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't. There are other ways to make this enjoyable, to make money out of it, and do what you love. And people just, it's like they forget that that's even an option. And I just have to remind them, just spend some time giving them permission to try it, and just remember that you can even do it.
I love this, because it's so, like, it makes so much sense, yet it doesn't make sense, because we live in a world where, you know, the starving artist, the suffering artist, and, you know, as you were talking before you even mentioned the starving artist, I was like, yep, and, you know, you have to be poor because, you know, you only get paid after you die. And people go, oh, actually, that person was really good, but oh, too bad they're dead now. You know.
I know, right? It's just the way that society has taught us to be. And so people, they just kind of blindly stumble around, you know, accepting it and sanctioning it and saying, well, this is the way of the world. And that's something that in my coaching, I really like to challenge people and say, well, do you really believe that? And why are you staying in that space if you don't believe it, if you don't want it? And I think what we're seeing, particularly now in the world, is people are waking up to the 9 to 5 doesn't work for them, you know, being in jobs they hate, not having enough money, not having enough freedom to live their lives. People are waking up and questioning and saying, actually, I want something more. I want this life to work for me. And this goes back to what we were saying about that cookie cutter approach with coaching. It doesn't work because people want something else. People want it to work for them, and we're all individual and unique. So you come back to that idea of allowing people to dream again and just giving them permission to dream, permission to go find that happiness. I mean, for me, my word of the year this year is joy, because I was burnt out last summer, and the only way I could get myself to do any work was just turn up at my desk every single day and ask myself, where is the joy for me today? And I ended up working on a passion project for like 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks solidly. I did no other work. I sent off emails saying, I will get back to you later. I just need to do this to kind of fill my cup again, just to feel like there was something worth living for, something good, something fun in the world, something I love doing. So I built on that by saying, do you know what? This year, my word of the year is joy. What does that look like? And the amount of people who I've told, joy is my word of the year, and they say, oh, that's amazing. I want to use that as my word of the year as well. They're almost like they don't think that that's a word they can use, because, you know, you see people use that word of the year like it's growth, it's evolution, it's expansion, all of these things. And then literally it's just the simplest joy. And it's made such a difference for me. And then other people see that, and it's almost like it gives them permission to try that as well, which is really important, because otherwise it's just a really sad life.
It is. I love that. I might have to steal that for next year. But as you were saying joy,
you're another one.
As you were saying joy, though, I thought of the word fun. So it might
Even
be
better.
fun. That's the word.
Perfect.
Because I know myself, I have trouble having fun, you know. So, and
but see, it's done exactly what it seems to do with everyone. The minute I say it, they're like, oh yes, I could totally use that and see what it does, because it's not, the thing about using something like joy or fun or happiness is they're not prescriptive of, they have to be to do with your business. They're not really about any goals. And we are quite a goal orientated society. So suddenly it's like, actually, what does it look like to just have a day where I don't do anything but have fun? What does that look like? And people kind of, you see their brains kind of stall because they don't know what to do with that.
Yes.
And it's funny but sad. You're just like, oh my goodness. Can you imagine going through your entire life, getting to the end of it and saying, I never had any fun. I never had any joy in my life. I never chased the dreams. I never did the good things. I never felt good because I was stuck in, you know, that hamster wheel. And you think, oh, wow, this is the message that I need to share. And obviously I try and do it through the creativity and the writing coaching, but as a wider message, it's still valid. Like, chase your joy, whatever that looks like. It's really important.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for the reminder. Such an important reminder. And, you know, and having fun and experiencing joy is not I'm happy for today. And then you do all the things that you usually do and then go, is this constant reminder every single day, every single moment. And I always, one of my past mentors used to say, if it isn't fun, it shan't be done. Right.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
So it's something.
I think it's important because people sort of feel like they have to be, if they can't be happy 100% of the time, that it's not going to work, it's not worth doing, that they're doing it wrong. But actually what I found is, you know what, I'm not happy 100% of the day, every single day of the week. You know, you have things go wrong, you get stressed, all of these things, but it's about being able to come back to that state of having fun and happiness and joy and doing the things that make you feel good, and kind of making that your baseline rather than being down on the floor and feeling miserable as your baseline. It's about creating something that's a bit elevated. And when you're, you may not be having the best day of your life and it's all perfect and you've bunked off work and you're having an amazing holiday or whatever, but you can sit there at your desk and say, do you know what? I feel really good today. Nothing specific has happened, but I feel good, and that's my baseline. That's the really important piece.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been doing, I'm in an experiment at the moment, a trust experiment that I created. But one of the things that I've been doing is when I ask for guidance is what's the next most fun way to get me closer to my desire. So then I'm trusting, but I'm also making it fun as well, because then it's not like, oh, what's my next step? And it's like, oh, I don't want to do it. So it's really
you don't want to do it fun. then, do you? If it feels fun and exciting, you're so much more likely to go for it, aren't you?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just like, and you'd put a different kind of vibe out when you do it. You put a different kind of energy into it when you come at it when it's fun and exciting to you, rather than, oh, I have to do this. It's like, I get to do this.
Yes, exactly. I want to touch on something you said before about burnout and doing nothing, because I was talking to Jocelyn actually this morning. I was like, when did I talk to Jocelyn? Jocelyn is someone that Camilla and I are friends with, but I was talking to Jocelyn this morning, and we we're going, we need to really learn to do nothing, because we're just both very, we're just both people that likes to do stuff all the time. And sometimes it might be that we're not doing anything, but our brain is still doing stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
And obviously with you experiencing burnout, last summer, if you don't mind just talking a bit about what that looked like, and your recovery process of just letting yourself be and do what feels good. Well,
I think we kind of we're always pushing ourselves. We're always got to do and achieve and all of these things. And what happened for me was it happened over 3 nights, and I was sitting watching TV with my husband just one evening, and I don't even know what it was. It was something really small on TV, and I just sat there and burst into floods of tears. And I'm not really a crier. And he kind of looked at me like, okay. Didn't really say anything. Next night, I was just sitting there and just burst into tears again for absolutely no reason. And he's sort of looking at me like, I'm not really sure about this. Like he could see something was going on, but not quite sure. Happened again the third night, and he sat me down and he said, you know what, I think you're a bit burnt out. Because he was getting me to talk about it, and I'm just really tired, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm on this hamster wheel, and I'm fed up, and I don't know what to do anymore, and I can't think clearly, and I just felt miserable. And he said, I think you're burnt out. You need to stop. And he made me clear my deck for an entire week. So I had to go send some emails and just say, you know what, I will get back to you in a week's time. I'm sorry, something's come up. I just need some space. And I sat there, and I think I slept for a couple of days, like solidly just slept, did nothing. And then I thought, I can't just keep sleeping. I need to find a way to fill up the cup. And there is that kind of niggle in the back of your brain, like, I need to be doing something. I can't just sit here and do nothing. So I came up here to my desk. I sat there and I was like, I don't want to do any of it. Like, really, none of it seemed exciting, interesting. I just thought, what's the point? And I sat there and I thought, well, how can I get myself to do anything? What can I do? Because going downstairs and sitting on the sofa for another day and just napping or watching rubbish TV didn't seem like the answer. So I thought, okay, what would it look like if I just did something that is really fun to me? No strings attached. I don't have to do it because I have to do it. I just do it because I want to. And I remembered I had this passion project that I do every single year, based on my dogs. I do a children's, the annuals that you used to get at Christmas, the Beano and the Dandy, those kind of things. I do one about these dogs, and we raise money for charity every year. And I thought, oh, looking at cute dogs all day sounds fun. I could do that. And I just did. I just started. And I thought, as soon as I started to feel a bit tired and had enough, that's it for the day, I'm going. And I just logged off at whatever time it was, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, didn't really matter. I just stopped. And then I just went downstairs and chilled out. And the next day I came back to my desk and it was like, where's the fun today? What do I want to do today that sounds fun? And it ended up being that same project. And every single day it was that same project for, it must have been nearly 6 weeks. I just worked solidly on it. But what it did for me is, rather than just resting and rather than just doing, like your face masks and your bubble baths and all that kind of self-care that I kind of think you should be doing anyway, or, just in your life need to be in there to just look after yourself on a daily basis. Rather than just doing those things, I thought bringing that fun in and doing something that actually makes me really excited, because I started to talk about it nonstop to my husband, to my friend, to my family. I was just like, oh, hey, I was doing this, the annual and the pictures, and look at this cute dog, and look at this page I did. And I could feel myself getting excited. And they were all just like, really? It didn't do anything for them. They were humouring me, but it wasn't obviously their fun thing, their exciting thing. But for me, I could just feel myself filling up with more energy to do stuff. And then one day I sat at the desk and I was like, okay, where's the joy for me today? What's exciting? What's fun? What do I feel like I want to do? And it wasn't that project. It was something else. And I thought, oh, that's new. And suddenly I was able to do that same thing, have that same approach of what is fun today, what feels good. But it wasn't just about this passion project. I could apply it to parts of my work. And I started to look and think to myself, okay, what parts of my work really never bring me any joy? They're just never fun. I don't like doing them for whatever reason, whether it's just not my zone of genius or whatever it is. What can I do about them? Can I bin them off entirely? Can I outsource them? Can I automate them? What can I do with those things? And I started to really streamline so much of my business and just try and focus. I mean, it's still a work in progress. There's still days where I sit there thinking, why do I have to do this bit? And then I think to myself, well, why do I have to do this bit? What can I do with it instead? That if it's not bringing me any joy, how can I transform that into something that is? Can I just get rid of it, hand it off, something so that I stay in my lane of being happy and fun? And I think that's really important, going back to that idea of the doing nothing part, because it's freed up my time. I'm not spending all day, every day doing all the admin and all those little niggly technical things that I didn't enjoy doing. I have more free time to think. And for creators, that's actually really important. We forget that we need time to do nothing, because we're not actually doing nothing. Our brains, like you said, they're working in the background. You're coming up with ideas. You're making connections that you don't realize you're doing, because what happens is it then comes out of you fully formed. It's like, oh, here's the idea. But you've been perhaps working on it for days and weeks and you just didn't know. So having that time, and I started to, in my day, in the morning, I get up, feed the dogs, have breakfast, and then I have at least an hour where all I do is meditate. I sit there and write. That's it. And when I say I sit there and write, I don't sit there and just scribble the whole time. I'm sitting there, I've got the pen in my hand, I've got the paper open, but sometimes I'm just thinking and just listening to the thoughts and just allowing them to flow. And it makes such a difference just having that time. And I know it can be really hard for people to find that time in their lives, but this is where it comes back to, how can you streamline your life? How can you kind of get rid of those tasks that just don't light you up? And yes, it can be really hard in terms of not everyone's got the cash to go get a VA or whatever it is, but there's things like automations and all kind of things you can do to start building yourself to that point, and just find those little pockets of quiet where you're allowed to do nothing. And it just makes a difference for how you feel. I think it's definitely made me more creative and given me more kind of a more sustained energy, because I'm not spread so thin all day every day, because I've handed some stuff off and streamlined what I do. It just means that I don't get burnt. I haven't been burnt out since. And I've still got that energy and enthusiasm to keep going with things, even when, you have the hard days or the hard weeks. It's but I still want to do it because it's still fun. And that's the really important piece.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your experience with burnout and, how you got through it. And I just love what you did to, get back into it. I mean, so important that we just go, what is going to bring us fun, and allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission to just stop, to go,
Yeah, it's so
I just
important.
can't do any of the stuff that I'm doing right now. I just need to stop and look after me. Look after me. Like,
That's
wow.
the most important thing, because people, they're so busy serving everyone else. You've got your responsibilities, whether it's children, clients in your work, family, etc. But you can't look after any of them anywhere near as well if you're not looking after yourself.
Yes.
And people just forget that. And again, it's that permission to just say, I'm the most important person, and owning that and being okay about that. Because you know what? I spend 100% of my time, 24/7, 365 days of the year, 100% of my life I spend with me. I don't spend that much time with anyone else. So A, I've got to like myself. B, I've got to look after myself. And C, I've got to have fun with myself. Because otherwise, what's the point? It's not a fun life. And you just start to feel like bitter and resentful at everything else that you do and everyone else.
Yeah.
If you feel drained. So
yes,
it's definitely a lesson that takes time to learn and get used to. It's not something that you can just switch on overnight and say, right, I'm the most important person, I'm going to look after me. It's definitely, there's boundaries that you've got to learn to set and reset and keep asserting those things and make it like non-negotiable. But when you start to see the results, what a difference it makes. Because I know for myself, the days I don't meditate, I can get away with about one day of not meditating in the morning. But if I miss two, I start to get a little bit ratty because I've lost out on that time for me, that quiet time to come back to myself. I just notice it. I'm slightly more irritable, and I think, oh, okay, I need to make sure I've carved that time out for myself again. What happened there? Because it really does make a difference. You don't realize at first, but then you have those moments and you think, oh yeah, I've got to come back to looking after number one here.
Yes. And such wise words. It's so simple, yet it's so not easy to do. But thank you so much for reminding our audience that, take care of number one, and then everything else will flow. Yeah.
It does. I think that's the really important thing for the femininity, the divine feminine, all of that stuff. When you are looking after yourself, it just does flow easier. There's a different kind of, instead of pushing, you're just allowing things to come to you. You're just flowing. And that's the difference.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the time, Camilla. So I've just got a couple of questions to ask you before we wrap up. The first one is, having gone through everything that you've gone through in your life so far, if you were to go back to a younger version of yourself, what is that one key piece of advice that you would give your younger Camilla?
I think I wouldn't tell her to do anything differently as such, because I don't know how that would change the outcomes and where I am now. But I would tell her to trust in herself more and stop listening to everyone else, because she really did have all the answers. She really did know what she was doing, but she just was too busy listening to all of this rather than just listening in here.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell her.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And lastly, what is currently setting your soul on fire, Camilla?
So I've started creative writing again, and I've been writing poetry on and off since November last year, but really with aplomb recently, and started sharing it online and got quite a good response from people.
Beautiful poetry.
People asked me, thank you. People were asking, are you going to turn it into a book? And I said, okay, yeah. So I'm halfway, like, yeah, why not? it just leap, just take the leap. I don't know if I feel completely ready, but you know what, I'm not going to find out unless I try it. So I'm already writing the poems. If I don't put them into a book, what am I going to do with them? They're just going to sit there. So I'm halfway through writing that. Started to also map out my first fiction novel, which my 8-year-old self is going to be absolutely delighted that I finally got there. Because, you know, I've done a lot of non-fiction writing in various ways, shapes and forms, but that was always the dream. So for me, on personal levels, they're what setting me on fire. In terms of my business, it really is just seeing people unlock their same soul stories and share them with the world. That work, you know, we talked about it earlier, but when you see it like really land for them and suddenly they're just away on a boat with it and they can just share it and they're not afraid, they've got all the permissions that they need and they're just in flow. Yeah, there's nothing like that feeling for me.
I love it. I'm so excited to see how everything unfolds, and I'm looking forward to your book of poetry because your writing is beautiful, really.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. So Camilla, thank you so much for, you know, sharing your love and wisdom with us today. If people want to,
thank you for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. I'm just so glad that you're on. Such a great conversation, really, just such a beautiful conversation. If people want to find out more about you or how they can work with you or collaborate with you, where's the best place to find you?
So I'm obviously on all the different social media platforms, all the obvious places. Just search for Camilla Fellis Arnold. Pretty sure there's only one of me, so you'll find me. I'm usually the profile picture. I've got my hat on. Otherwise, in terms of like my writing, coaching, publishing, that kind of thing, www.tecassia.com is the best place to find me. You can send me an email and we can see how I can help you, how I can help you get those soul stories out and into the world.
Beautiful. I'll have all your details in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Thank you once again for this beautiful conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.